Ahoy! Today we're covering what is, in my opinion, the saddest news in gaming this year. And that is that Crucible is cancelled. The development on the game has officially been cancelled. There's gonna be some plans to keep it alive for just a little bit. There will not be any updates to it anymore, there will not be any further changes, and it'll basically never launch. If you haven't followed the development of Crucible at all, the game initially launched, previously having had a small-scale testing phase, and then was pulled back into development after the launch basically failed. At that point, it was announced that they would work hard to improve the game in various ways to make the experience better, and that they would have the time to do so as well, being under Amazon, so they'd be able to change the game to something that more people would enjoy and that would have less of an entry barrier. And they did various changes in that regard, like for example, updates to the tutorials, updates to various in-game mechanics, updates to the creeps on the map and all that type of stuff. But apparently, even after that, the general consensus was that the changes are not enough to make the game more sustainable, more interesting, and Amazon just decided to stop working on it altogether. I think this is very sad, and it's also a very bad signal. This is not the first game that Amazon has folded on. We had Breakaway previously, which was more of a niche concept in my opinion, but could have worked at the time, but they decided that it's not good enough yet, we're gonna cancel it. And now they did the same thing again with Crucible, where it initially seemed that that wouldn't happen again and that Crucible would be safe from this, and they will just give that game its room to breathe. Now the implications here could be many things. It could be that Amazon as a company just considered the genre not profitable enough, which is a bad signal for ability-based games in general, which is really sad honestly because I really like those types of games. And it could also just be that their expectations were just vastly different from what they would get out of it, or they think that other projects they have just have more potential in the long run. It's impossible for us to say, but obviously it's also a concerning signal for their other upcoming game, which saddens me especially as well. I want to read through their message real quick and share my thoughts on that. Essence Hunters. In July we moved Crucible into closed beta, with a list of features that we felt would enhance the player experience, which we shared publicly on our roadmap, and with the exception of custom games, which we expect to ship in the coming days, we completed them all. With those features shipped, our next step was to evaluate the feedback we've heard from you, paired with the data we've collected, to determine our path forward. That evaluation led us to a difficult decision. We'll be discontinuing development on Crucible. We very much appreciate the way that our fans have rallied around our efforts, and we've loved seeing your responses to the changes we've made over the past few months, but ultimately we didn't see a healthy, sustainable future ahead of Crucible. We'll be transitioning our team to focus on New World and other upcoming projects from Amazon Games. We're offering a full refund for any purchase you made. You can find more information on our support page. We'll also be disabling credit purchases within Crucible. In the next few weeks, we'll be hosting a final playtest and community celebration, both in-game and our official Discord. After that point, we'll be disabling matchmaking, although you'll still be able to play Crucible through the custom games feature. Stay tuned for more information on that event. Servers will stay up for custom games until noon PST on Monday, November 9, 2020. So, not even that will stay around very long anymore. Thank you as always for being a part of our community. This has been a labor of love, and we're grateful for the time we spent on playing the Crucible with you. Signing off once more, the Crucible team. I imagine this must be incredibly frustrating for the team behind the studio who have poured years of work into this game. Now, this is something that often happens in game development. There are many games that never make it to the final stage or just fall flat when they are released. But in this particular case, Amazon was behind it, so I think the studio also felt more safe doing this and being able to experiment with it, and now the decision was still to cut the funding for the game, I suppose, and just not go ahead with it. This is a very surprising switch, by the way, that must have happened relatively sudden, because not too long ago I was actually approached for a campaign for Crucible, so it's not like this is something that seems to have been planned long term, at least not in any visible area of Amazon, not something that I guess the devs would have been aware of. So again, I can just voice my frustration, my sadness about this here, because I think this game had potential. I know it was very rough around the edges, I know it was not very accessible for people, especially those who did not come from MOBAs basically, but I think those were obstacles that the team would have been able to overcome. The problem was maybe also that the long-term planning for the game wasn't really there at the start in the way that I would have hoped. I think this game would have required more maps from the start, for example, to give it more variety, and maybe even a larger hero pool to start with, and other small things that would have enticed people to stay more long-term, but it will never even get to that point. And obviously I'm also in a sad way reminded of Gigantic here, which with less big backing, I suppose, even though they had Microsoft at one point, kind of met the same fate. Also a somewhat ability-based, somewhat strategy-based action game in a similar genre with a similar concept that just didn't really find a footing. And to me it's so sad that these type of games don't seem to do well enough. We have enough shooters, we don't need more shooters. I wish we could have more of these games, but if people don't like to play them, or if they just want them to be perfect from the start, I suppose it's going to be a super rough market for the foreseeable future unless there's a major shift in what people want from games. That is of course not in defense of the flaws that Crucible had. I think there are things that could have been done better, but I think there were also issues that were just way overblown. Like, the game would have been better with a minimap, but not having a minimap wasn't the only reason that people stopped playing, to put it that way. I know that the studio for New World was a different one within Amazon, so I hope that as many of the current employees as possible will find a place in New World or somewhere else, because I feel like they might let some people go as well, and I hope there's not too many people losing their jobs over this. On the other hand, I also hope that New World will survive, because honestly, I've played that a little bit and I'm hooked already, and I know that when I like a game, it often meets a very bad fate. So fingers crossed that that doesn't go that way, though it does have a very different approach. The whole team, like, behind Crucible basically decided to drop the game out of nowhere, whereas with New World it's more a gradual approach where they release a lot of details about the game beforehand. There are multiple preview and testing phases. They collect a lot of feedback before the game even makes it to launch, which gives me more hope that it will survive, because by the time it makes it to launch, it should be a relatively polished game that has a lot of features that a lot of people will enjoy. I will most certainly not make any promises not working at the game myself, because I jinxed it with Crucible already, but I do feel like the chances of New World finding a sustainable base are higher, especially since even in the preview phase it seems to have had a decent number of players at any point, which I can't say for Crucible, where you could hardly find matches in Oceania at all basically. And so Crucible, which I once was hoping to have as a secondary game to play on my channel, will join the ashes of Gigantic, and we're gonna stick to Smite because that's the one ability-based third-person game that survives them all. This also, by the way, once again makes me wonder how much of a chance the clones of Paragon really have with their smaller studios behind them. Obviously they have less of an overhead in terms of cost, but at the same time I think this genre is just not something that's super accessible at the moment, and not something that the new generation of gamers is all too interested in, as unfortunate that is. And again, I hope it changes at some point. If there is another game like it at any point, you will most certainly hear it here. So if you're new to the channel, feel free to hit the sub button and maybe the bell to stay updated for that type of content. And other than that, I hope to see you for the next one soon. ZiSotto, out.